the two big announcements of Jorge Masvidal, Gamebred's finest, Jorge Masvidal and Nate Diaz are fighting in a boxing match, pay-per-view, June 1st. Tyson, Jake, not so much, but when it comes to Nate Diaz and Jorge Masvidal, let me pitch you guys on why this is important. The younger generation, the old heads are going to understand this, and you guys are going to vibe with this. The younger generation, the new media that's, the Nelk Boys and Ninas of the world, and the new generation of content creators for mixed martial arts, for UFC, they don't understand how kind of screwed UFC fighters are. They don't know how the sausage is made. They don't get it. They didn't, they're just there for fun. They have fun questions. They do the thing. And it's great content. I'm not hating on it. But for the older heads and for the people that have been following the UFC, let's say you just jumped on the UFC bandwagon during Conor McGregor. You should still understand this. Even though Conor's set, he's not set because of his fighting. He's set because of his outside the octagon deals, through his whiskey, through his fight with Floyd Mayweather, even though that's fighting, but still, you know what I'm saying? The UFC, he's not set in any facet because of the UFC. Pay. Now they gave him notoriety and the fame to allow him to do all that stuff. I'm just saying, as far as compensation, he can't just ride off into the sunset. He could if he's super frugal and did his thing, but he's on yachts, on Lamborghinis and Gucci, so he has a high overhead. My point is even if you started with the Conor McGregor days, when you see a Nate Diaz, Jorge Masvidal, JDS, Alan Belcher, Mike Perry fight, whatever it is, when a Woodley, Jake Paul fight, a Ben Askren, Jake Paul fight, Anderson Silva, Jake Paul fight, you got to realize, whether you like the fight or not, you should be celebrating it, not hating on it, because this is a after effect. This is the butterfly effect that these guys have to make these choices when they're retired or they're longer in the tooth, because they're not set financially. So what Nate Diaz and Jorge Masvidal are doing is a result of them not being set for being superstars in the UFC. So when you see a Nate Diaz, Jake Paul fight, no matter what the outcome, you should celebrate it. When you see a Jorge Masvidal, Nate Diaz fight, you should be celebrating it, because these guys have figured out a lane, whether you like it or not, they figured out a lane where they can capitalize on the fame that they've had from the UFC and monetarily make money, where they couldn't do that before. This was never an option. When I retired, this was not an option. I got into podcast and stand-up. Well, there was no options. So now that there's this avenue for guys to make ungodly amounts of money, you should be supporting it. Now, I get it if financially it's tight, another pay-per-view, I get it. I think it's around the same time as UFC as well, that June 1st, that's a big one. So you just leave it here, Jen. But the point is you can't complain about fighter pay and then hate on these UFC fighters when they have to do other things to make money. These guys are beating the game, because just so you understand, Nate Diaz has his own fight promotion. I don't know what it's called.
Real Fight Inc.
Real Fighting. Yeah. Great.
Real Fight Inc.
Real Fight Inc. So that's his own promotion. So he's the Dana White of Real Fight Inc. That means he's getting the majority of the money. Jorge Masvidal has his own promotion, Gamebred. That means Jorge Masvidal is getting the majority of the money. Those two will split the majority of the money. And if you're new, you're not hardcore, when there's a UFC, when Nate Diaz fought Jorge Masvidal in the UFC, they got less than 10% of that gate. They got none of the gate. Forget about the gate. But they probably got 10% of what if that, when they fought each other in MMA for 5 rounds. So they're getting the lion's share. You should celebrate this. Even if, oh man, I'd rather them fight in MMA. I get it. Celebrate this. We want this. This is a byproduct of them not being set. They can't ride off into the sunset. It is what it is. That's the nature of the beast. This is the butterfly effect. So whenever I see this stuff, whether I like the matchup, and I like this matchup, I think it's a fantastic fight. Take my money. Nate Diaz, boxing, take my money. Jorge Masvidal, take my money. But those complain about this, you can't do both. Can't do both. That's like having an electric car and then thinking you're saving the environment and then also having an iPhone. It's insane. They contradict each other. It makes no freaking sense. They contradict each other. It makes no sense. So whether you love the fight or not, you should support it. Instead of hating on it, doing all this stuff, talking trash on it, talking trash on social media, because these guys are they're going to get the bag. These guys are going to make money. Francis Ngannou. This is my point last week. Francis Ngannou. No matter what happens, of course, social media is being mean to him with the Joshua fight. He's won, guys. He's won. Francis, top 2 heavyweights in the world at the time, had to borrow money from another fighter to make ends meet. That's what they're dealing with. So him getting the Fury fight, won. Support it. Him getting Anthony Joshua, support it. I don't care if he gets knocked, if he's in there for a whole 10 seconds, he gets knocked out by Tyson Fury, Anthony Joshua, he's won. Because remember, what he did in the UFC, as much as you guys love him, and very rarely do we see fighter pay complain about now in the media. That stuff is good. You have some of the old heads, Helwani talk about it, Luke Thomas talk about it. Some of the older heads who've been around the game for a while, they know how the circus goes. But the new media wave, the Nelk boys, they assume everyone's set. They don't know. Ignorance is bliss. They have no clue. Nina, no clue. No, nor should they. That's not what they're not journalists. I'm not either, but I was the sausage. They used my sausage. They ate it up, dude. You know? So we should be any fighter that goes on to do anything outside the UFC. And remember, if they were compensated like the NFL, NBA, they wouldn't be doing this. They wouldn't have to. Like NFL, there's NBA players who were superstars. Blake Griffin, superstar. Dunk contest. You seen him lately? Do you see him doing all this bullshit? Jumping on TV shows, doing time? No, because he made so much money. Went, check, please. I'm going to go buy a house in the Palisades and live my life. I made it. That's how it should be, but it's not. There's nothing we can do about it. So what we can do is support these guys, because Nate Diaz and Jorge will make more money in this fight if we support it than they've made in their entire careers in the UFC. That's why all this stuff is good. Whenever you see a UFC fighter doing anything outside the UFC, support it. Support it. Otherwise, don't complain. Don't complain. Don't complain about Tyson Pedro when he retires and goes, I'm dead broke. I didn't get a job. What? Been in the UFC for 8 years. Yeah, that's how it goes. So don't complain when you see guys, and they have to do this. They have to do this. And it's a good fight.